CMMC Compliance Guide podcast. We're here to help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance. But today, we're here to give away all the secrets for free. So if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today, we have special guest Chris, a certified CMMC assessor, certified CMMC professional, and provisional instructor. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the ins and outs of CMMC assessment processes, breaking it down for those of you who are prepared or trying to get prepared for compliance. I'll be playing the role of you, the listener, trying to ask questions that our mutual customers, Chris's and our customers might likely have. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me, Austin. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Brooke.
No problem. Here I am. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, Chris, you were one of the less than 100 individuals officially certified as a CMMC provisional assessor and instructor. You've led CMMC instruction for more than 1,000 students. You've centered most of your instruction around course development. Is that right?
Yes. Have developed some CCA course material. Yeah.
Awesome. And you've authored practice exams, and you're one of the 51 officially recognized licensed training providers today. There's not a lot of.
Well, I work for one. I actually work for 5 licensed training providers, but I have my my preferences.
I gotcha. You're one of the first 200 CPMs registered out of more than 2,500 active today.
Yeah.
And you are an active member of many invite-only thought leadership bodies, such as the CMMC Industry Standards Council and the C3PAO Forum. You're positioning on the front lines of the CMMC 2.0 rollout, and your cumulative 25 plus years in cybersecurity are uniquely qualify you to guide DIB contractors through the certification process. Appreciate you having.
Wow, that sounds really important. Who is that guy? I don't know.
Say, man, when I grow up, I want to be Chris, man. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I've definitely been in this for quite a while. I used to have like a full head of hair when I was younger. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And Austin, I really I appreciate the intro and the kind words, but honestly, I have just over the years developed a real passion for security and for helping small businesses, right? As a small business owner myself, I totally get it. Okay. I get that, like, every dollar spent is a dollar that doesn't go in your pocket to feed your family, right? So totally get that.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate it, and happy to have you here. So, well, let's get into it, guys. So, what our goal of today is to bring our mutual customers, listeners, and prospects, or anyone really in the needing CMMC or cybersecurity compliance, to put everyone in front, or put an assessor and us implementers. Did I get the verbiage right, Brooke, for how you?
Yes.
Okay. Put us together and just kind of fire some questions at both of you on their behalf, on our listeners' behalf, so that way we can hopefully just kind of break through the myth and mystery and get some real raw answers. Yeah. Awesome. Well, what I'm going to do is start with the basics for our listeners and jump into what exactly a CMMC certified assessor does, how you might help businesses that are needing compliance to go through that compliance process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Austin. I'm assuming that question's for me.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect. So CMMC assessors, and I really appreciate you not using the other A word through this entire podcast so far, because I think that it's a really important, distinction between an assessor and an auditor, right? We are not really there to audit the systems or audit their compliance. We're there to truly assess the compliance. And there's a subtle difference there. Auditing is definitely checklist based and focusing on, do you really do this? Do you really do this? Kind of from that it always reminds me of that movie My Cousin Vinny, right? When he's interviewing the old country boy on the stand and he's talking about his grits and he's like, "Are you sure about that 5 minutes?" Right? Yeah, y'all know the reference, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, so assessors, that's not what we're there for. What we're there for is it's kind of similar to being a teacher. When a teacher gives a test, you can think of a test or an exam as, something onerous to you, or you could think of a test as an opportunity to show your knowledge, right? It's an opportunity. It's like the big game. You've been practicing all week. You go to the big game and you show that you did your homework, right? You did the work. That's how assessors should, at least in my opinion, they should approach an assessment. This is an opportunity for the OSC really showcase their compliance. So we want to go into it giving I'm sorry, I'd use an acronym, the organization seeking certification, OSC, give them the opportunity to prove their compliance, right? It's not about we're trying to catch you do something. It should be more about we're going to give you the opportunity to prove it, right? So, with that in mind, what to expect from an assessor? You should expect them to follow the Cyber AB's CMMC assessment process, right? And it's also called the CAP. It's gone through multiple revisions over the last 4 years. Since I think the first version of it I saw was version 2.1 during my provisional assessor training. What we teach is version 5.6.1, and hopefully the official final version will be coming really soon between now and December. And it breaks it down into what an assessor, how they are supposed to behave during an assessment. So hopefully no one thinks that the assessor is just being cruel, for no reason. They're following the cap. That's what we have to do.
Awesome. Yeah, back in the day, a couple years ago, when this all first came out, what we would always say to people, because it was all unknown then, was if you want to achieve compliance that way, then just make sure it's defensible to an assessor. But now,
Yeah.
it sounds like from what you're saying is with the CAP, that there's an outline process that
Yeah.
assessors will follow. So if you're an organization seeking what was it again? Compliance
Certification.
certification,
Yeah.
and you're worried about how an assessor might treat you. If you go check the CAP
Yeah.
out, that'll be
Yep.
kind of a shortcut.
Yeah. There is a public version of the cap right now, a draft version out there. They call it 1.0. But I would caution people from going and looking at that. You might as well wait. Hopefully, here in the next couple weeks or so, you'll get a 2.0 version, and that will literally be the final version. So that'll be the authoritative source. And you're right, Austin. They can just look and they'll have a playbook on what the assessor's going to do because we're bound to follow that.
Like that makes a little more um, above board, and everyone kind of knows how things
Yeah.
are going to go. So yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I'll shift it over to Brooke a little bit and ask you, Brooke, how does your or our role as an implementer fit into the picture when working with someone like Chris?
Well, really, I mean, we would be working with the client, of course, and making sure that they've got most of them, can hardly spell CMMC, so it's going to be us guiding them to help, and they don't want to know how to spell CMMC
Right.
see, I can't even say it right, but they don't even want to know how to spell it. So it's going to be us guiding them, making sure that hey, we've got to have this documentation. We need you to do this. we'll do this part because it's technical or whatever, but we'll be guiding that whole process with the client. They'll be heavily involved, of course. But then, as far as the assessment process itself, be work with like Chris or another assessor, and they'll again, there's no consulting during the assessment process, so you can't say, hey, how do we do this? But if I give Chris a document and here's a list of users, and Chris says, well, there's no names on here, maybe I have a clue. I got to go get a document with names or something. But working with the assessor, you're truly, it's not an adversarial relationship, just as Chris was talking about. It's not anything like that. It is different than the other A word you were talking about, Chris. I try very hard not to use that and to make sure our clients know that it's different. But it's not an adversarial relationship. It's going to be something where you're working together to try to make sure they've got all the documentation they need. The more documentation you can have prepared ahead of time, the better for the assessor. So whatever you can do, to make life easier for that assessor, the better. And because you don't, probably jumping ahead here, but it's kind of like when you get pulled over by a cop, you don't want to be a jerk to the cop because they might find a reason to write a ticket to you. Ticket. So you want to be nice to the officers, you want to be nice to the assessors, you don't want to be jerks to them. It all revolves around it is not an adversarial relationship. They're really just trying to do their part to help you get your certification. And what I might say is, when you look for an assessor, you want to talk to them and understand who they are and all that kind of fun stuff. We've met some that we really feel like are going to do a good job and not nail you to the wall. Right. So, but all goes back to just working with them and realizing it's not an adversarial relationship.
Yeah. So it's I think, I don't know if y'all ever watched the movie Dodgeball with Vince Vaughn and and she comes there to do his tax audit, sales tax audit or whatever, and she's like, where's your receipts? And he goes to the closet and has a shoebox of receipts and throws it at her.
Yeah.
I think our goal as implementers is to do the opposite of that, and to have everything, all the documentation easy put together, without no receipts in the shoebox, and because the easier we can make it for the assessor, the easier we make it for the organization that's trying to get certification, the easier it goes around for everybody else, and assessments get done quicker and hopefully a little more cost effective for everybody.
Yeah.
That's
a great point. I mean, I tell my students all the time, remember, assessors are people too.
That's good. I like that. And for everyone out there wondering, the other A word is not a bad word, but it's auditor. Is that right? You guys are?
Yes.
Yeah. Chris actually said it a while ago. So
yeah. I don't mean to make such a big deal of that. Okay. I mean, I don't want to get the wrong, because I know a lot of auditors and they're fine people. It's just that, we had that impression of, like an IRS auditor come in and, I see this receipt here, there's a smudge on it. I'm not going to, that shouldn't count as a write-off. And you're like, what? Yeah. So don't have that. And something, Brooke, you brought up, I don't know if this is on the agenda, but something you brought up, and I highly recommend to organizations seeking certification, is get a coach. All right. Your specialty might be manufacturing. Your specialty might be adhesives, right? I have a client who they know everything about adhesives. I know nothing about it. I mean, I literally barely squeaked by chemistry in college. I think I got a D. Okay. So I know nothing about adhesives or chemicals or whatever. They know everything there is to know about that, but they didn't really know anything about CMMC. And so they brought in a coach. And you guys, it sounds like you're very well equipped to have the perspective and help the OSC, coach them up, right? And be there during the assessment. Because sometimes you may need to translate some language between the
Absolutely.
assessor, whatever they're saying, and whatever the customer needs. And so I think it's a really important role. And I think that a lot of OSCs underestimate the value of, not just having somebody help them prepare, but have them there with you. One of the roles, like early in the CAP, they talk about the roles and responsibilities, and one of the roles is a point of contact for the OSC. And they specifically say that person doesn't have to be an employee of the OSC. They could be a contractor, a consultant to come in. And I think it's a very valuable role. You're probably undercharging for it.
Well, thank you for bringing that up.
No, it is. It is. It's important, right? Because I mean, as an assessor, I don't want to go in and say, "Can I see a list of your authorized users?" And I look and I see a blank stare.
Where
I don't want that.
do I get that
Okay.
from?
Yeah, that's uncomfortable. Why put yourself in that situation?
Exactly, exactly. And that, that's a lot of our customers have realized, along the way that they don't they don't want to know all the details about CMMC
Right.
necessarily, and they don't want to know, they've
Mhm.
got, just like you said, they specialize in manufacturing or
Yeah.
adhesives or
Yeah.
non-destructive testing or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
um, and they specialize in that, and they want help doing this. They don't have a
Yeah.
whole team to be able to hire and set aside to just do this. So, or hire internally, I should say. So, that's where folks like us come in. We help
Yeah.
them implement. We help them with all their documentation, policies, and all that kind of fun stuff. And when y'all
Mhm.
come along, we sit right there with them and help them get everything ready. So,
Awesome.
absolutely, that's most of our clients realize that. Some of them ask later on after we go through all this. They're like, "Well, hey, are y'all going to be there for this?" Yes, we will be there. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Good to
Yeah,
hear.
was just talking to aerospace machine shop out of Montana yesterday, and I asked him, "You guys working with anybody for compliance or IT?" And he said, "No," and I think that might be a bad thing. So I think that might be what you guys are trying to say.
It might be. Yeah. Yeah,
So
because especially in aerospace, because they're in if the information that they handle, the CUI in particular, has an aerospace or military application, it is quite possible that they would need a level 3 certification, not just a level 2 certification. So I don't know if you guys have looked at the requirements from 800-172 that relate to level 3. That's a pretty high bar. I mean, we thought level 2 was tough. Man, level three's, wow, it's going to cost some money, big time.
Yes, it will. It sure will.
yes, yes, it will. Yeah. All right, well, that's actually a great way to pivot into the next topic, and kind of wanted to get into the actual assessment process itself,
Yeah.
and help everyone kind of understand that at a high level. So, Chris, I'm going to tee up a question to you first. A lot of our customers, excuse me, are unsure about what the assessment process like actually looks like.
Yep.
And it can kind of be scary to them sometimes to think about. So,
Sure.
I was hoping you might be able to walk us through
Sure.
what businesses should expect when they're being assessed for CMMC compliance.
Sure, absolutely. And Austin, you're right. It is a great segue into that. And as I mentioned, what to expect from the assessor. Well, the assessor's behavior and what they're going to do is ruled by this document called the CMMC assessment process, the CAP. And I can't stress enough, as soon as you can get your hands on the final copy, look at it, understand it, because it is truly the playbook. Now, the version of the CAP that we teach in the classes is probably pretty close to what the final will be, right? So, but I do want to caveat anything that I tell you about the cap is based on that draft version. So it is subject to change. But generally speaking, the cap has 4 phases, right? So there's phase 1, plan and prepare the assessment. Phase 2, conduct the assessment. Phase 3, report recommended assessment results. And then phase 4 is an optional phase. It's called closeout poems and assessment. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds around what a poem is and all that stuff, but it's just an optional phase, right? We'll leave it at that for now. The main thing though is to understand that phase 1, that plan and prepare the assessment, is the majority of what's in the cap. Okay. I mean, it's the majority of pages. It has the most amount of detail. And the idea there is to not catch the OSC off guard, right? To make sure that by the time you finish planning and preparing for the assessment, there is like a 99% chance that the OSC is going to pass the assessment and everything is going to be good, right? So it's kind of, think of it as like a little toe in the water, make sure the temp's okay before you go diving in. And I really like how they did this. I mean, I kid a lot, and I'm kind of sarcastic about, government bureaucracies and all that, but honestly, the DoD and the Cyber AB did a great job in designing the cap. Okay. Because that plan and prepare assessment, right? It walks through how an OSC is supposed to, request an assessment. It walks through establishing those roles and responsibilities that I mentioned before. As far as the point of contact and all that kind of stuff, it talks about ascertaining the assessment conditions, right? So walks into like the scoping and the framing and all that kind of stuff, right? Trying to figure out, it gives the assessor a great idea of what is your environment, right? What are the technologies you've implemented? What's the scope and all that stuff? And then formalizing that pre-assessment planning process and then verifying readiness. So I don't know if you guys listen to other podcasts, but I don't want, it's probably not appropriate to mention the name of another podcast, but there's one out there. It has a number at the end of it. But anyway, they talked about, what's going to happen if an OSC starts going through this planning process and it's discovered that they're just not ready. Do they have to continue and go on with the rest of the assessment and pay for the whole assessment? Well, no, they don't. The cap kind of considers that and says, if you're not ready at the end of this phase, stop. And either replan the assessment, reschedule the assessment, just, if there's just a scheduling issue, or cancel the assessment altogether. And maybe the OSC needs to work with a different, C3PAO, a CMMC third party assessment organization. God, I love the acronyms, right? And so they sort of came up with the term of a false start, right? So you didn't fail your assessment, you just had a little false start. Yeah. Right. And so it's not quite as daunting. And now, granted, that planning process can take, a week or two to get things worked out, but at least you haven't paid, for an entire assessment and then just throw away that money. Hopefully you're paying, just maybe a little upfront planning and scoping fee or something, for the phase 1. Right. So, like I said, that phase is so important to allow an OSC the opportunity to kind of figure out, are we actually ready? Right. Now, the other thing that we offer as a candidate C3PO right now, and actually I've been offering it for quite some time, is a mock assessment. Right. I come in and we'll do a pretend assessment. Now, and as long as I don't give you advice, as long as I don't turn it into a consulting engagement and give you recommendations, I can run the assessment just like a real one, but it's not real. and you get a report that says, if this were a real assessment, here's what your score would have been. Here are the things you would have passed. Here are the things you would have failed. And as long as I don't say anything beyond that, then it doesn't take me out of qualification to perform your actual certification assessment. And the Cyber AB was very clear about that as far as where is that line. And so, that's another opportunity, for certain clients that want to do that. They want to have like a simulated assessment.
I love that.
That's a really good point, Chris, about the mock assessment. I hadn't really thought about it that way before. I've thought about, having some consulting beforehand and then going through an assessment. But having a mock assessment would allow you to have the same assessor come back, same C3PO come back and perform that assessment because you've not provided any consulting during that.
Right. Yeah.
So
I mean,
a very good point.
Yeah. As long as everybody understands that, what is it the stockbroker says, past performance is not an indicator of future performance or something like that. Because, they're very clear. No one can guarantee you that you're going to pass an assessment, right? That even the same person performing a mock assessment, it is against the code of professional conduct for them to turn around and guarantee that an organization will pass 6 months later, because things could change.
That comes up more than once in that code of professional conduct, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's the one thing that I don't imagine will change. Right. Which, by the way, is another document they're working on finalizing, is the code of professional conduct. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are two great gold nuggets I just love. Because, for a lot of our customers, these are family businesses. They've worked their life on. It's their baby. It feeds, a lot of people in the community, employees, their family. And at the end of the day, we're playing a high stakes game, and for a lot of the customers, if you've got some defense work, it's probably a large percentage of your revenue. And if you fail an assessment and, you're at some point you stop getting that revenue coming in, it could really hurt. It could put you out of business. And so you're really taking the stakes from really high and you're lowering them if you one, you have the false start provision, that you can, if you start an assessment, you can get out if you're maybe not ready. And two, if you do a mock assessment before your actual assessment, then you're just increasing the likelihood that you're going to pass, and you're lowering the stakes. So I really like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Austin, it's interesting you brought that up of, what are the consequences of failing the assessment, right? Your contracts go away, right? You can't really bid on any contracts anymore. But what I think is really interesting, right, is there's another consequence. And I don't know if you guys read the news yesterday, but Penn State actually settled their False Claims Act case. They settled for a little over $2 million. And my alma mater, Georgia Tech, is actually in the midst of a false claims suit that was brought by the Department of Justice. And so not only, if you fail an assessment, not only do you lose the contracts, but it's possible, if you had submitted an SPRS score before, right? So I'm assuming your customers were probably familiar with SPRS, right? The Spurs. If you had submitted a score before that said 110, like you're perfect, and then you fail an assessment, what does that mean? Was that score a false claim? And could the DOJ come after you and decide to sue you for breach or for a violation of the False Claims Act, right? Which means they can claim triple the amount of the contracts that you have gotten in the past, plus, I don't remember what it is, like 50 grand or something. Whatever $2,000 was during the Civil War, adjusted by inflation. So who knows how much money that is now, right? Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it's serious because honestly, as a small business person, the thing that scares me the most out of all the different risks that I accept and try to mitigate, it's legal risk. Because I just don't know, I mean, you can literally be sued out of business.
You can, and that False Claims Act that's the real deal.
Yeah.
What I can, and you don't want to mess with it because you don't want to test it. It's
No.
just stay way away from that. And
Yeah.
but what I can say from what I've read about at least the Georgia Tech one, it seemed like that one was pretty egregious. You know,
Yeah, they're
they did
talking
some stuff
about
that you're
what.
like, really, you did that?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
uh,
They're talking like 50 million, something like that.
right?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, they haven't settled yet. So I've been watching that really closely. In fact, I'm giving a presentation at a conference on Friday, this coming Friday, at the Converge Cybersecurity Conference, and we're going to talk about that case exclusively during the talk because it's a big deal. It really is.
It is a big deal. And like I said, the stuff that they did, not necessarily just the judgment, but the stuff that Georgia Tech is at least alleged to have done,
Right.
uh, was pretty out there, and
Yeah.
they just completely didn't do it.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, and the scary part is how many other universities are like doing the same thing,
how many
you
universities, how
know?
many, and that's what the DOD is worried about is people just
Yeah.
going check, 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 check,
Yep.
and people are like, well, why are they doing all this? Why do we have to? Well, it's because a bunch of people just go check the boxes
Yeah.
and they don't actually do it. And our clients are, I know our clients are, we hear a lot of them complain about the fact that other people don't do this. They
Yeah.
don't go through the process and they just check the boxes. They're like, we're
Hmm.
spending all this money, we're doing all that, spending all this time, all this
Yeah.
effort, and Joe Blow down the street, we don't think they're doing it because there's no way they can be doing
Yep.
that,
Yep.
and
Well, once
so
it- once
it's
once they have some evidence, there's this thing called whistleblower
right,
protection, and yeah, I I see that's what I anticipate happening, right? Because once you get the lawyers involved, right, it all changes, right? It's all fun and games until the lawyers get involved.
it
And
is.
there are law firms out there that are advertising, is your competitor, submitting false claims? Do you have evidence of that? Come talk to us, right?
Really.
Because the lawyer gets a percentage. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they take these cases on contingency, right? And
They do.
so, the same thing happened when they passed the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA. And that was back, what, 7, 8 years ago now. When they passed that, all of a sudden, if you went out to California, you would see these ads, these billboards, right? Is somebody misusing your information? Call us, 1-800, we'll sue them, right? Because there was money to be made. And,
Right.
welcome to America.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh man. So Chris, thank you for all that. One of the other questions that we get is how long would an assessment take?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I used to do forensics, and someone would ask me, "Well, how long is it going to take you to find the smoking gun that we need?" And I would say, well, I would say two things because I'm a fisherman, so I would say, well, how long does it take to catch a fish, right? Oh no, or how long is a piece of string? Well, I don't know, right? Yeah, and not to be glib, but honestly, the answer is that depends. It is the scoping of the assessment, right? I can give you kind of a minimum, right? My thought is that the assessment itself, right, including the planning phase, um, and including the reporting and everything, I think a good estimate is probably 5 to 6 weeks is a minimum duration of time. Okay. The level of effort that the assessment organization is going to have to put forth is probably not, six times, not 240 hours. Okay. But because there's a back and forth, because there's, I need this piece of documentation, I'm waiting, right? I need to schedule an interview with this person, I'm waiting, right? There is going to be a certain amount of waiting. So I think 5 to 6 weeks is probably a minimum. If you're a small contractor and, you only use an enclave, right? Now I know you guys work with a lot of manufacturers. So that time frame may go up a little bit because there's going to be some on-premise, as we in the IT folks say, on site. We're going to have to come to your location. So there's going to have to be logistics involved in that and scheduling and all that stuff. So that may extend it out a little bit, right? But from a cost perspective, it doesn't really impact it that much. It's just more duration.
Awesome. And so I assume that, say you have everything put together and organized, that might make that go quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more documentation you have and the better organized your documentation is, the more the assessor can mark off and say, yeah, it really appears that they're performing this practice. I don't need to ask them any questions. So we save the interview, or I don't need to see it firsthand. We save that portion of either the screen sharing session or the on-site. Now, I do want to kind of caveat that a little bit with the current version of the CAP, the draft version has 15 assessment objectives that require an assessor to go on site and physically view them. So if you are processing, storing, or transmitting CUI on site, like in a manufacturing area, expect the assessor to come and at a minimum check those 15 things, and they don't really have a choice, right? The assessor has to do that.
Absolutely. I love that. Brooke, I was going to bring up how we help do that, but I'm actually going to tee that to you because that's my job as customer in this podcast. So how might we help businesses through this assessment process to make sure that they're fully prepared for someone like Chris? So whenever he comes, step through the door and check those 15 things and verify everything.
Sure. Yeah. So that's, goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier as well. Not only do you need to make sure that, all the controls are implemented and working, right? But you need to make sure you have everything is documented. You have your list, you have your policies, you have all that stuff well organized, like Chris said. All your proof, everything you need to have that all together. And don't. We use a GRC platform to make sure that we have all our documentation in one spot. I've heard from a couple of different things from different assessors, whether you export it out of there or give the assessor access to that platform. Maybe Chris might have have input on that, but really the point is that you have it all together in one spot, organized, easily attainable. You can get it to the assessor easily, all that. And that if you can do that, that'll make the whole process go a whole lot better. And of course that just goes back to preparation. Chris, one of the questions I have is, I know there's a planning portion you were talking about, because really before you can come in the CAP spells it out, before you can even come to an agreement for the assessment for the client, you put in a ton of hours before you can even get there. So I'm sure some of the I understand the documents, so you have to trade back and forth. Well, not trade back and forth, but hand over. But I guess at that point in the planning portion, that would come out that you have everything organized in a GRC platform, for instance, and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the steps in the planning process, and by the way, I mean, I outlined like 6 steps within that phase. but there are actually like, I don't know, if you count the sub steps and everything, there's like 30 of them. Okay. So it really gets down very granular. But one of them, well, actually, the last sub step of the planning phase is to execute the C through PAO to OSC contractual agreement. So literally, they outline, okay, now propose a price and have the OSC consider the price and potentially sign off for the rest of the assessment. Right. So really and truly, when you reach out to a C through PAO, if they just give you a price for the entire assessment, honestly, I would kind of question that. I would say, how is it you can, and even if they send you this, really long, detailed scoping survey, which a lot of them have, and I have something like that myself, just based on a 5-page survey that you answered some questions, how could they really tell you, with confidence what they're going to charge you for the entire assessment, not just the planning phase, right? Now, I mean, every business does it different. If they're willing to take that risk, then good for them. You know, but honestly, I want to know, as much information as I can. And if I have a document, an official document of a CMMC assessment process that says I'm not supposed to give you a price until the end of phase one, then that sounds good to me. I'll wait as long as I can, because even, if you say you've got, 200 policies, okay, well, how long are those policies? How many pages are they? Right. And how well are they organized? Are you using a GRC platform that, that makes it really easy for me to find stuff? Or is it just, is it a box full of receipts, right, that you're dumping on my desk? Right. I mean, it's all about time, right? It's all about, the time and the opportunity cost of the assessor. And really, what you said, Brooke, it definitely resonates with me, man. I mean, if you're organized and I can rip through stuff and I know exactly where to look in each individual document, then yeah, that's going to affect the price. Absolutely.
So I'm actually happy that you guys got there on the price, because that was the next kind of category, is the top customer concerns. I think you guys have covered a lot of them, failing assessment and whatnot. But one, I'd like to, I guess, maybe have a little more structured talk on is not obviously we can't answer what it's going to cost, right? But what makes up the costs,
Yeah.
in an assessment, from Chris, your angle of being an assessor and doing the assessment, and Brooke from your angle of having to be there for implementation and therefore the assessment. So, and I'll let you hit that first, Chris, and then Brooke.
Okay. Yeah. So I get this question all the time, right? How much is this going to cost? And I ask that question a lot. Okay. Someone tries to sell me something. I'm like, okay, well, how much does it cost?
You want to know?
Because if I can't afford it, then I need to quit thinking about it, right? Because all that's going to do is cause me pain. Oh, I want that, but it's too expensive. Oh, but I still want it, right? Somebody made me want it, right? So I don't want it unless I can afford it, right? And also, it's one of the first things that I tell, clients when they come to me and say, I've heard about the CMMC thing. Should I do it? And I'm like, well, that is the question. Should you do it at all? Right? Look at your business. What percentage of your business would go away if you just didn't do CMMC, if you didn't do DOD? And compare that to a ballpark estimate of what it's going to cost to become compliant, which includes getting an assessment. But honestly, getting an assessment is really small, the small part of that equation, right? Getting compliant and maintaining compliance is the bulk of the expense. And compare those two numbers. And if it doesn't make sense, I had a client reach out in 2020 when this whole thing first started, and they wanted a mock assessment. I tried to talk them into a consulting engagement, but they wouldn't go for it. They wanted a mock assessment. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll give you a mock assessment. Just realize I can't give you advice. We went through the mock assessment. They used the results of the mock assessment to calculate what it would cost them to become compliant, and they decided to jump out of the game. They literally said it's just not worth it. We just can't see how the value of the contracts is going to compensate us for the cost involved in becoming compliant. Now, remember that was version 1 of the model. So, maybe they need to adjust it a little bit, but still, right? It's valid. And so, all that to say that I've kind of come up with some general ballpark ideas around what an assessment will cost, right? Because I hate it when somebody says, how much is that going to cost? And I can't give them a straight answer, right?
Right.
So much like the how long is it going to take, right? I've sort of honed it down mentally into, well, what is the minimum? Okay. Because, could you conceivably get it for this cheap? And there's one question right now as far as FedRAMP equivalency. And I don't want to dig into too much of the details, but depending on how that shakes out, and it's really not quite clear in the rule. It's going to need some interpretation from the Cyber AB and the DoD. But depending on how that shakes out, I think that's going to make a difference of probably $20,000. All right. So if it turns out that equivalency is what we thought it was previously, and it's sort of a get out of jail free card kind of situation, you could probably get an assessment for $40,000. Right? That's possible. Now remember, probably not for a manufacturer, sad to say, because you've got on-premise stuff. I'm talking about a total cloud enclave environment, 40 grand. If the FedRAMP equivalency goes the other way, which it looks fairly likely, you're looking at probably 60 grand for a small assessment, right? And I know that sounds like a lot of money, but I think Brooke will probably attest to say, but getting compliant and maintaining compliant is going to cost at least 2 to 3 times that, right?
Right.
If not even more, right?
Yeah.
Implementing,
Especially over time, absolutely.
yeah. Implementing these solutions are not cheap.
So, one question for you, real quick, Chris. When
Sure.
if somebody hires you to come do a mock assessment for them,
Mhm.
I mean, I would imagine, besides submitting everything,
Right.
that would be pretty much it'd be very close. So,
Yeah.
would you consider if I've got to help my clients budget for these things, right?
Yep.
And you've got to consider this much, you've got to plan for this much.
Mhm.
Would the mock assessment be about the same?
Yeah, the mock assessment is a little bit less because of the lack of having to report. And
Mhm.
believe it or not, I mean, I thought I was like, okay, so we have to upload the report to this website called EMAS, right? Um, that takes 5 minutes. I've uploaded things to websites before. It doesn't take much time, but apparently it does.
Of
Be-
course, of
because
course.
because that EMAS platform is, I think it's administered by the Navy or something. And apparently it's a big deal. It takes a long time, like 20 or 30 hours to make sure that everything's right. And, it uses JSON and you have to edit the files and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, then I guess we got to account for that. So, that's a pretty good bit of time. So, I've tried to make mock assessments as, affordable as possible. The problem is um, that following the cap, okay, that the idea is we make it as real as possible. And the problem is when you get into that scoping exercise, when I start asking questions about the scope, companies very quickly realize that they don't understand scoping, right? And so we end up with a false start and have to start over. And I have to send them back to, okay, well, who's your consultant? Because they need to work with you on scoping because you've not created an appropriate scoping package, right? And there was a speaker at, I think it was the CIC conference out in San Diego this past year, and I'm thinking it was Amy Williams, but it may have been somebody else. Apologies if I didn't remember the right person, but they expressed it really well. They said the scoping package is a story. You're telling the assessor a story. So think of it as that. Think of it like a marketing package that you would hand a potential client to say, here's our scope. Isn't our scope great? It's solid. You can depend on our scope, right? It's reliable. It's professional. We've done it right. That's how you need to approach your scope package because the assessor is not supposed to help you develop the scope. They're very
Right.
clear. Assessor can't help you develop your scope. They are to approve it or not approve it. And that's it. That's their only choices. So you want to make sure you sell that scoping package hard because otherwise they can't go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I must have missed that particularly, because that's a very good way to put it. I
It
like.
is. Yeah. Yeah. It was a great way to put it. It's a story that you're telling and you're trying to sell that package to the assessor to convince them that you've done the appropriate scoping and you know what you're doing and that the scope's not going to change. The assessor's not going to stumble across, they're not going to come on site and stumble across some server and say, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't on the list of the scope. Is this thing in scope or not? Because that's, that'll kill an assessment right away.
Right. Absolutely.
From the implementer's perspective, what costs are there for an assessment?
Well, um, as far as from implementers side, our consulting sort of side, we're going to be there through the process, through the preparation. There's going to be You can get all sorts of documents prepared and uploaded into your GRC platform of choice. And by the way, we have a favorite one, but we'll, ask me later and I'll tell you. Um, at least for CMMC specifically,
Mhm.
which probably tells you what it is. But we have a favorite GRC platform because it just flat works. Um, and I've heard, I think you said favorable things about it too, Chris. But in any case, you can have everything uploaded, but some of the things you need to have, send me a proof, and that can't be generated 6 months ahead of time necessarily.
Right.
So the proof you have has to be recent. If you're missing 3 employees off your list, oh well, those are new employees. Well, that's probably a problem. So
Mhm.
some of those things can't be done. So you can have all the preparation done. You need to finish up with your proof. Make sure you've dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's. Um, all that. So that's going to be a little bit of a cost there for you. The other thing is we sit down and we're there through the whole process. We plan to be there through the whole process. And I know, like I said, most of our clients don't even want to know how to spell CMMC. So they want us there through the whole
Mhm.
process.
Yeah,
So
definitely valuable.
we just plan on that. So it's for us on the IT provider side and cybersecurity side. Uh, that's out of normal scope, so that's a project. Anything that's a project is out of scope. New servers, new location, whatever it is. Those are projects. So this would be another project basically for our client, and so it'll be us being there the whole time, working with the assessor, getting that ready, and it'll be somewhere close to the same amount of hours that that an assessor spends on this. So we've been telling them to be close to the close to the assessment cost is what we've been telling
Okay.
our clients.
Interesting. But and that's just your cost. That's not the cost of them implementing additional solutions. Like if they needed MFA, if they needed multi-factor authentication, that would be over and above your cost, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that is all
Yeah.
those already implemented.
Right. Yeah. See,
And that's us being there. And generally, we're the ones providing working with them on all that. So we make sure all that's done ahead of time, and
right.
they've already um, uh, absorbed that cost or spent.
Yeah.
They already meet that bar. So yes, this is above and beyond
Yeah.
the implementation itself.
So for us, it's mostly going to be our time spent in meetings and
Mhm.
being there with the assessor or in any preparation that needs to happen.
Yeah, generating the documents, getting access to the GRC platform or exporting all of it, whatever it may be, getting the documents to the assessor. I have no doubt that that you give everything to the assessor, and the assessor is like, well, we still need one, two, three, and A, B, and C, and so
Yeah.
then you have to go, find that, and so.
Mhm.
Um, that's as much as you can prepare. There's always going to be those other things, but
Sure.
yes, that's basically what it's going to be. Us sitting there with being with the assessors, being available to them, working with them, generating all that content.
The next topic I had, which I think we can probably skip because it was how to approach an assessor. And from what I hear, you guys
Be
correct me if
nice.
I'm wrong.
Yes.
Be nice.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
an adversarial relationship. Yeah.
With your palms up,
Right. Go check the cap out and maybe
Yeah.
read up on that so you know what they might be asking for when they come knocking on the door. Um, and most of all, have documentation and be organized.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I do want to mention something that I mention quite often in the courses is if somebody asks you if you're wearing a watch, don't tell them what time it is. All right.
That, thank you for bringing that up. I meant to mention that,
It's
and
yeah.
yes.
Listen to the question, take a breath, pause, think about what are they asking me for, and then answer what you think they're asking you for. Right. And don't answer anymore. Don't keep going. Right. There's no need to, because honestly, as an assessor, I just want you to answer my question anyway. I don't care what other stuff. I really don't. And you're just wasting my time and your time, and you might be getting yourself in trouble. And,
That's
you
that's the
know,
important part right there.
yeah. I mean, if I walk up to the building and, I walk around the building and maybe I even check the doors to make sure they're all locked, right? And I come around the front and I say, okay, let's talk about physical security. And I say, I noticed there were no doors propped open. That's awesome. So, is that a policy? Don't tell me that, yeah, it's a policy, but yesterday we ran through the building and reminded everybody because employees are always propping the doors open. I'm like, stop. No, I don't need,
La 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 la.
yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, I got this box of receipts, but the real receipts are in the other closet. Don't, don't say that.
Your best foot forward.
Yeah, yeah. Just answer the question that was asked, and also when the assessor is taking notes, right? I notice this all the time, not just in CMMC, but otherwise. When I'm taking notes, I don't continue talking. So it becomes a little bit of an uncomfortable silence. Coach, and this is where the coaching comes into play. When you do a mock assessment, that happens, right? And so as the person on the other side of the table, get comfortable with that silence. If if you need something to do, play with a phone or play with a thumb drive or look at your phone or something, go look at Facebook or something. Don't feel the need to fill the silence because it's probably just going to get you in trouble. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And even if it doesn't get you in trouble, it can lead you down some rabbit holes that you didn't really need to go down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Let the assessor take their notes, just get comfortable with that silence. It happens. Right.
you know, it, Austin mentioned the cap a minute ago, and I might just you kind of you've You pretty much said it, but it's a very prescriptive model.
Yeah.
It outlines it
Mhm.
very well, and you're like, why do they have to write everything down and really tell you exact? Here's the point where you have to, give them a quote and an agreement to
Right.
sign. And
Mhm.
why does it have to be there? Well, the good thing is with all this is that one of the things I think they're trying to do is make sure that all the assessments are the same and there's not a lot of
Yeah.
wiggle room to interpret and wonder if the assessments are really going as they're supposed to be
Yeah.
going. So
Yeah.
they're very prescriptive. I think that's a good thing.
Mhm.
I think it'll help out the industry a whole lot. So
Yeah,
I like that.
absolutely. Well, I think it speaks to what Austin was talking about when he mentioned, you got a contractor who looks at Joe down the street who's not compliant and outbidding them because their prices are lower. Well, we sort of we're concerned with the same thing with assessment companies, right? We
Mhm.
don't want these fly by night assessment companies to swoop in and sell assessments for 19.99 when they don't accomplish the objective of actually validating that the contractor is doing what they're supposed to be doing,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
We want that level playing field.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Only way to make sure competition is productive competition is that everyone's on the same
Sure.
length. Yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome. So I think we're kind of closing out here, and I just wanted to end with some actionable tips for
Hmm.
our listeners. So that organization seeking certification, um,
Hmm.
Chris, and then Brooke, what is
Yeah.
one or two actionable steps today they can take to prepare for their assessment?
Yeah. I mean, you probably already heard it if you've been listening to this podcast. Read the cap. I mean, you can read the draft one, just realize that it might change. So, I mean, there is a draft out there on the cyberab.org website. If you have the time and inclination, absolutely feel free to go out to the DoD, their CIO site. I believe it's dodcio.defense.gov, if I'm not mistaken. It has a lot of information out there. It's got all the assessment guides and scoping guides and all that stuff if you have the time. If you don't have the time, get in touch with someone who does. Okay. Just anybody. Okay. Go out to the Cyber AB marketplace. You can find registered practitioners. You can find CMMC certified professionals, CMMC certified assessors. You can find C3PAOs, provisional instructors like myself. Contact information is out there on the marketplace. Use that as your source of finding help, right? Because it will be worth it, right? If you don't have the time, I understand that. It's all about opportunity cost, but somebody's going to have to spend the time. So you're either going to have to spend it yourself or pay for somebody else to spend it.
That's a very good point. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday. They were asking, what it would take and should they hire somebody to come help. And
Mhm.
so, well, if you're not already up to speed, you've got a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of training to do,
Yeah.
and a lot of understanding how it's going to be, how the assessments are going to go. But there's a lot there to understand and do. And so, if
Yeah.
you don't want to, or not able to spend
Yeah.
the time to do that, then it's better to go hire somebody to come help you because it's going to cost you either way. It's going to cost you time with your own time, which is money,
Hmm.
or it's going to cost you money for somebody else's time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's very important. And I'll go back to I feel like a broken record. I've said this during this podcast, and I've said it in some of our other ones, but really it's preparation.
Hmm.
Not just what Chris said. About spending the time to learn and do it or getting somebody else, but it's preparation. You've got to be prepared. You can't just say, not be either not be there or partially there and then say, hey, I want to be certified, in March,
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to happen, you know? So uh, it's preparation. You've got to implement everything, make sure you're there. You've got to, uh, get all your ducks in a row. I mean, you've got to be prepared for this, and you've got to be prepared for an assessor to come along and assess. I mean, there's preparation and implementation for all that, and then there's preparation for the assessments. I mean, there's a lot of preparation. So it's an old Boy Scout rule: be prepared, right?
Yep.
Awesome. So read the cap and be prepared.
There you
That's
go.
right.
Awesome. Thank you both for your time. Chris, if we could give you a shout out.
Sure.
I realized I don't think we mentioned the business you run and everything earlier, which you probably should have. So if you could now, share about your business, where people can find you, all
Sure.
that.
Sure. So, for the most part, if you go out on the internet, I mean, literally on the internet, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you are, and just shout out CG Silvers, right? Then you'll probably get me, right? For full disclosure, my full name is Christopher Guard Silvers, like Guard. I know, weird. I'm in security. And so 20 some odd years ago, I bought the domain cgsilvers.com, and pretty much, on all the social medias, I'm CG Silvers, right? So yeah, I have a website, cgsilvers.com. In addition to CMMC, just really quickly, we also do penetration testing of all types, wireless, web, network, all that stuff. We specialize in social engineering as well, like phishing and voice phishing and physical, people hire me to break into banks and stuff like that. We do a little bit of incident response, not emergency, but we do like tabletop exercises, things like that. And then we have an education offering as well. We use team-based competitive learning, which I'm really into, very passionate about. So like I say, in addition to CMMC, we do those things, and we do other compliancy frameworks as well, like HIPAA and PCI and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So
Sure.
go check Chris out if you're needing a good assessor or anyone penetration test or break into bank for you, anything like that. So make sure it's
Hey, Chris, I
legal
need
though,
to hire
please.
you.
Yeah, although I will not break into your girlfriend's Facebook account, okay? Please, no more requests for that.
Good enough. Well, thank you both, Chris, Brooke, for all your
Appreciate it.
fantastic insights. Hope this conversation gives our listeners a better understanding of what to expect from a CMMC assessment and how to prepare for it. As always, if you need help with implementation, have questions, feel free to reach out to our team here at Justice IT. Until next time, we'll see you then, but keep your business secure and compliant, guys.